Jennifer Lichter, welcome to the Free Trail Podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
I'm so glad to do this. We were just chit-chatting before getting started. It feels like perfect timing. We have so much to talk about, but I start all these interviews in the same place. Jenn, my opening question for you is, what makes you, you in moments of introspection? What are your unique strengths and weaknesses? How do they show up in your life?
I'm definitely a plus person. So if I set my mind on something, I am all in. So I'm either all in or I'm like not interested at all. So that's kind of like the unique aspect for me. And then some of my weaknesses probably be, I'm such a people pleaser that I think sometimes that could be a little bit of my downfall in, saying no to things, and probably over exhausting myself in that regard. But yeah, that's pretty much, I would say, my biggest strengths and my biggest weaknesses.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. Well, speaking of something that you've said no to, maybe let's just touch on this now, and then I'm sure we'll come back around to it later. Mm-hmm. Starting with where you are now. I mean, this is an important moment in your career, coming off back-to-back big course record victories at Broken Arrow and Speedgoat, carrying great momentum. Those two results would definitely make you a favorite to win or be on the podium of OCC later this month, which would be a career-defining achievement. Yet you decided to withdraw from OCC. In other words, say no to something yes. to focus on the World Championships. Talk us through that decision briefly here at the top.
Yeah, it was made shortly after Broken Arrow. Heading into the season, the question mark was Worlds at the end. You want to be part of the team, but you just don't know. Like there's a qualification period, and then there's a resume, and you just like never know, especially with like who knows who's going to stand out that year. And so after Broken Arrow, having gotten into the long trail team and then having made that short trail team, it just felt like, to me, doing OCC and Speedgoat and Worlds, especially being the long trail team, which is going to run more like 100K. I just felt like it would have been too much to ask out of myself. And I think sometimes when you're like in your fittest state in your career, it's so easy to want to say yes to everything. But there's also that fine line when you're fit where you're riding this fine line of like being fit and then getting injured. And so for me, it was like, I've been here before in 2022 where I felt so fit and I was saying yes to all these things. And then I ended up with a stress fracture at the end and having to drop out of Worlds. And I was so, so sad to drop out of Worlds because, that's like the end. That was like in November in 2022. And so this year, feeling pretty similar, actually even more fit than I was in 2022, I was like, well, I've been here before. And this is like the defining moment of like, where does my season go from here? Do I end up continuing to respect my body and gain fitness, or do I follow, like this exciting moment of my career and potentially end up crossing that line of like, now you're asking for too much. And so for me, honestly, I was like all in, I wanted to do it. But, this is why I have a coach, because sometimes it is so hard to make the decision for yourself. And so I called my coach like 2 days after Broken Arrow, having just like come down from the high and been around, and we just decided that it was best to do OCC when I didn't feel like I had to choose between a performance at OCC or Worlds. And my coach was under the impression of like, OCC is always there every year, Worlds is not. So let's do OCC at a year where you don't have to feel like you have to sacrifice or push your body beyond maybe what it's wanting to, like smart, I guess, what's smart.
Yeah. So a very mature choice, and some themes there that I know we'll come back and talk about. But going back in time, of course, you live in Missoula, Montana now, but I have read that you're from Bogota, Colombia originally. Tell me about your upbringing in Colombia, how and when you made your way to the USA.
Yeah, so I was adopted along with my 3 other siblings. I'm the middle child. And we basically lived in an orphanage, basically from the age for me of 2 years old. We were adopted in 2005. I just turned 9. And we, growing up in the early, or early 2000s, late 1990s, whatever, Colombia was like, really bad in the sense of like the cartels were pretty bad. The economy was kind of like really under like just a mess, basically. It's kind of dangerous to live there. And my birth parents were pretty much involved in the cartel business. So I didn't know my dad. My birth dad was shot when I was like 2 years old. I don't remember anything. And so my birth mom, she was pretty young. I think she was about 16 years old when she had my brother. She was about 18 when she had me. And then a few years later, she had my sister with like someone who kind of, left her. So she was really fairly young with 3 kids. And she was also pretty, how do I say this nicely? Addicted to drugs. Cause like cocaine and meth and all that stuff was pretty crazy back then. And, we were discovered on the streets, after she kind of like would go through episodes of getting high and forgetting about her children. And so we were taken into the childcare services. And we basically, from then on, went through this whole journey of like finding parents. And I knew my birth mom for those first like 5 years, because we were in an institution where they were helping her try to get her on her feet to get us back. So it wasn't like an immediate, like, we're going to put these children into an adoption center. And so she unfortunately couldn't really get her life together in order to take care of these 3 kids. So then we ended up being sent into the adoption orphanage. And then 2 years later, adopted by these amazing people, who are from Wisconsin. I was, raised in a little town called La Crosse. And I basically grew up there. When we first came to the US in 2005, my siblings and I didn't know any English. We were completely fluent in Spanish. And so it was just this whole journey of like, what is life outside of like what we were raised into? And yeah, that's kind of like how I ended up in the US. Ended up getting a nanny who was like a university student who majored in Spanish. And so she was kind of helping my parents and us navigate our relationship, because my parents didn't really know any Spanish, My dad would just carry a Spanish dictionary quite literally everywhere he went. And for us, I think it was very exciting for us to like come to this new country and like have this sense of freedom, that we didn't know we had. And, my parents always say we were like just the most curious kids, like getting into trouble. I remember like finding a box of matches one day while my parents were like out running errands, and my siblings and I were outside like lighting them, like, this is so cool. Like, and then, like the nanny calls my mom. She's like, your kids are playing with matches. But for us, it was like the most exciting thing. Like we'd never seen matches before. And so, and so that's kind of what, our childhood was like. It was just like discovering this whole new world that we didn't know existed. Wow. And running came in pretty early as far as like me finding a place that I could self-express. Although I really starting like a 200, so I was more of a sprinter at first. I always joke about that. But
Jen, if you don't mind, before we get to the running, this is an incredible story, and certainly something that I didn't know about you, and that I'm guessing many people don't know about you. So if we could just spend a few more minutes just talking about this specific moment. I mean, you describe it as an exciting feeling of freedom for you and your siblings, but maybe there's probably other emotions attached to it too. At that time, were you feeling fear, confusion? You were still a very young child navigating what sounds like a fairly traumatic early childhood and a massive transition moving to a new country.
Yeah, I think the first, basically from the age of 9 to probably the age of 10, 11 years old, I think I was just riding this high of, I have parents now. And the thing for me, and I think the hardest part for me in transitioning all this, is I become such a mother role to my little sister. And so did my older brother, in the sense of like, he was protecting us and everything. And I remember the first time my sister said no to me, like, cause throughout this experience in the orphanage and stuff, I was kind of like a guardian to her. You know, I was always very aware of where Kimberly was. That's my sister's name, where she was, and just making sure she was feeling okay. She had everything she needed. And the first time I told her to do something in the US, like when we were adopted, and she said no for the first time, I like lost it. And I remember my birth mom being like, Jen, it's okay for her to say no to you. You're her sister. You're not her mom. And so it was the first moment of like, oh, I don't have to like take this weight of like taking care of this person, you know, because it became so it's like instinct at that point for me.
As a 9-year-old girl to behave like a mother for your younger sister.
And honestly, I still to this day have moments where I feel that motherly instinct in an overly protective way towards her. And she's 27 now, and, you know, and she'll like call me and was going through something. And my immediate thought is like, oh, I need to drive there right now. And I need to take care. I need to make her feel safe. And I think it's just so engraved at this point, but it was a very like crazy time for me as far as like, what do you mean? Like, it was like, it became like a purpose to me in a way. And so then it's like, oh, so I just have to be a child now. What do you mean by that? You know? And so it was just like so strange. And then also like my relationship with my adoptive mom was a little more rough going through the years than it was with my birth dad, like my adoptive dad, because my birth mom was alive and because I'd known her till like the age of 7. And so for me, it was like, how do I deal with having a birth mom that I left basically out of nowhere without saying goodbye? Because that's just the way things were. You know, they're like, okay, we just transition you. And then being adoptive and then having this adoptive mom now who's like taking such great care of me. And so for a while there, I actually battled with this guilt of, how do I love this new mom when I still have one back in Colombia? And that actually led to this whole like journey of an eating disorder actually in high school. Basically I was diagnosed anorexic. And all through that it came down to like the lack of control. And so basically I just had to sort through the feelings. You know, I saw a therapist, I saw all these people. It got so bad I actually was an inpatient in a hospital. It was just like, how do I unravel all this guilt that a 9-year-old carried? And at the end of the day, it was like, your life, you didn't really have control of your life, but at the same time, you were very aware of it. And I think in those first few years after being adopted, it's like, right, you know, you kind of forget it, you shove them down, you like get excited about life. And then it's like, when life settles down, then you're like, oh, now I have to deal with it because I can't keep shoving those feelings down anymore. Yeah. And so, so basically all through like high school and even a little bit through college, I dealt with this mental eating disorder, which really was just the root cause of trying to find something in my life that I could control. And then honestly, most recently, about a month ago, we found out that my birth mom is deceased. So it's come full circle now.
Jen, wow.
It's pretty crazy.
I think is maybe the most powerful start to a conversation I've ever had on the show. And I really do appreciate you sharing. I actually just wrote down something you said, which was the joy that you had of, I have parents now. And just like how fundamental that is to any child, the feeling of I have parents. And the transition to Wisconsin, it makes me want to ask about your adoptive parents, because it strikes me that it probably takes a fairly special type of person and a fairly special couple to adopt 3 children from Colombia who don't even speak English. Can you share a little bit about your adoptive mother and father and what makes them special and how they've impacted you in your life? Yeah.
So both my parents, you know, they knew they wanted kids. And I actually just finished visiting with my dad. He'd come down for 3 or 4 days and he left yesterday. And I wanted to ask him about the process of adopting from South America in general. And, both my parents, especially my dad, he grew up in a very Catholic family, very traditional family. And, through going to church and stuff, after he married my mom, they started volunteering down in Guatemala. They had a friend who was a dentist, and they would go and help these kids basically like do dental work and for free and stuff, and just like be around this community of less fortunate essentially. And my dad told me that he remembers one of these trips and seeing these children and just had this intense calling to adopt. And, they both wanted kids. And I think my mom's journey to wanting children was a bit difficult in that regard, in like the fertility and all that stuff. And so my dad said they looked at these like Latinos or Guatemalan kids, and they're beautiful. Like there's a calling here. And, I think it was in 2003, had just been sent to this adoption center. And each of us, I remember this very clearly, had been interviewed. And there were pretty simple questions like, what do you like to eat? What do you like to play? And I think my parents still both have those interview tapes of us kids in the orphanage, doing this interview for like, please, someone be our parents.
Oh my God, it's heartbreaking and adorable.
They still have those interviews. And I remember a few years after we were adopted, I remember watching them and just being like, wow, what a crazy, like we're here now, and, but essentially they ended up with one of our interview tapes, and they watched the tape, and my dad and my mom said they immediately were like, these are it. These are our kids. And then it took, I think they started this whole thing in like January, and it took all the way till May to actually come down to South America, meet us. We spent 2 weeks after they adopted us, because there's like a evaluation period of like, stay here for 2 weeks around the orphanage, make sure like you guys get along, make sure these are the kids you actually want, because who knows, you might be surprised. Maybe you don't get along, or maybe the kid's more difficult and you don't know it. And so after those 2 weeks spent around, Bogota, we flew to the US, and just my parents, like I always joke, I was like, you guys went from like 0 to 100 really quick. Like that's so crazy. And it's not like they got babies. They got these kids, my sister had just turned 7 in April. I just turned 9. And then my brother was about to turn 11. So these kids who like already had opinions, who already had a view of this world, who, had just different like manners and like the way they interacted with everyone. And, it was, I will say, like, they were so patient and kind. And I just remember just in my head being like, how did I get so lucky? Like, because as sad as it sounds, sometimes we get split. That's pretty common where kids get split. And 2, you can end up with like maybe not great parents, or like, and that's a thing. And it's as sad as that's to say, it's true. And so, I think for them, it's, they're very traditional. And so they raise kids. We were raised pretty traditional. Like we went to a Catholic school, like, and all these things. I remember the first time that I got corrected with like manners, like I threw a tantrum and I was like, what do you mean I can't eat with my fingers? Like, so, they were just very patient, but they were like those parents that were like, lead with kindness and love, but also like set your kids up for success. And I think they knew, and in getting 3 kids, that there was going to be a period what maybe the life previous to that was going to catch up. And for me, it hit pretty, in the teen, like when I was 11, 12 years old. And for my brother, it hit later when he was in college. And My sister's still fine. Who knows if you'll hit her later in life? I have no idea. But, you know, we all
because she had a good big sister looking after her.
I'm like, dude, it's crazy. And, you know, my brother and I always talk about, you know, when Kim gets to that point, like, we just have to like let her sort through that, because it's so easy to be like a nurture, you know, like nurture and like coach and stuff. But sometimes it's really good to like sit with those feelings and let them consume you, and then you sort them out, and then you realize like, oh, I'm okay. You know, like, doesn't have to be like this like really sad thing. It can be like, this is what led me to be who I am. This, you know, if I hadn't gone through that, like, I don't know if my life would be the same. Would I have met my like my adoptive parents, you know, like, and so coming from that, and now I'm 29 and like looking through everything that I went through, it's like, I'm like happy I went through that, because it is part of what makes me who I am, you know? And I think that's like,
it's probably part of the reason why you're such a fearsome force on the race course. But before we get to that, which I would like to explore, if it's not too personal, to ask you about when you learned that your birth mother did pass. Yeah. Did it bring up new grief, or did it maybe in a strange way provide closure to the story a little bit?
You know, I was not expecting to be as sad as I was. And it just made me realize, I remember when my brother told me that, because my brother went, you know, through his whole healing journey. Like I said, he just went through his. He had gone and flown down to South America, spent, I think, 2 weeks there, and, you know, went back to the orphanage, walked the same streets that we did, went to like the Colombian embassy. Like, he got paperwork regarding our adoption, regarding the orphanages, regarding our birth parents. And when he called me and he was like, hey, Jen, if you ever have a question and you want me to answer it, like, I'm happy for you. I have most of the answers that I know I was looking for. And so I remember jokingly on the phone being like, okay, like, we were FaceTiming, sorry, not like, and I was like, okay, I want to know if my birth mom alive, you know? And he was like, do you actually want to know that? And I was like, yeah, actually I do. And this is before Broken Arrow, you know, like 2 or 3 weeks before Broken Arrow. Wow. And my brother's like, okay, well, she died in 2007. And I just remember like, we were just silent for like, felt like eternity, but probably only like a minute or two. And I just started crying. And it was like the crime that happens and you have no control over it. Like, there's no warning. All of a sudden you're just crying. And I just realized it was like so deep. And I think it like surprised me. And then my brother, you know, he's on the other side of this FaceTime, and he's like, I get it. Like, that was me too. I didn't realize that I was like holding this grief, and I thought that I was okay because our life is so great and we have such great parents. And I was like, no, like, Harold, this is good, because it means that we loved her so unconditionally. And like, I, in a way, viewed it as, I forgive you. Like, it wasn't your fault. It was just the lemons you were handed in life. And unfortunately, they were pretty rotten, and you did what you can. And like, if it wasn't for your sacrifice, like, we wouldn't be where we are. And so, you know, I'm assuming she was about my age in 2007 when she died, which is, I mean, I'm pretty young. I feel pretty young. I hope I look young, but you know, it's like, for me, it's like, okay, so that was a blessing in disguise that we didn't go back to living with her, that we were like sent to this orphanage and then adopted and then had this great life open up for us. And so, yeah, to answer your questions, like long way of answering your question, but yeah, it brought a lot of grief, but it also brought this like sense of like a closing point in this like really sad story regarding my birth parents. And it just made me realize that some things that happen in life happen for a reason. Even if it takes till the age of 29, from 9 to 20 years for it to like close like that, you know? And sometimes when you're going through that, you're like, I don't know if this is going to make any sense later in life, but this feels right. And I think that's kind of like the approach that I took when I found out that she had passed away. It's like, oh my gosh, and for me, it's like, we don't know what caused her death. It didn't really say, but what really kills a 29-year-old who was addicted to drugs, like, you can kind of pretty much guess. And so, yeah, in a way, it's weird because we loved her, we forgive her, but in a way, we also dodged a bullet in the sense of our life could have been so different. So yeah, it was pretty crazy. I would say I grieved for like 3 or 4 days, and most of that grief happened while I was out running, actually, where I was just running and I would just cry and I just like, but it was healing too, because it did feel like I don't have to feel so guilty about like these two moms that I love so much. And because I remember when I was like 10 years old, I would have dreams of like having to choose between them. And that was just like, I remember that so clearly. And
which was creating this resistance to accepting your
100%.
Mother.
And my birth mom, like it's funny, I don't really remember her much, but my adoptive mom, we've gone through so much together, because really I did put her through the ringer when I was a teen. But, now we look back on that and our relationship is so strong because of that. And I feel like in a way she understands that she also had to be tested, like I had to test her love and she had to test mine, and like in the sense of like, now we have created this like unconditional love of like, you've seen quite literally the worst of me and I've seen the worst of you. And because of that, there's no more hiding. And so then there's just like the acceptance of like, okay, now we're like here, and we can start a relationship. And so I feel like my adoptive mom and my relationship didn't really start until I was like 14, 15 years old.
It's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
So then pivoting and connecting this to running, if you look back on this, and I'm sure you do reflect occasionally, because it is an amazing story of, among other things, luck to be where you are.
Yeah.
How has this experience shaped the person you are and the athlete that you are?
Like I said, I think it's created this like determination of, if I do something, I want to do it full-heartedly. And so, and I think it comes from the desire of like, oh, this is something I can control. Like, I'm going to control it and I'm going to do it in the best way that I can. And for me, sport, has kind of been that outlet of like, I can control the way the athlete that I want to be. I can control how much I try in training. I can control how much I try in racing, and in a way, running, I found running kind of later as far as like sport. I did like basketball, softball, tennis, like all these things when I was in high school, and running was the last resort. And once I got into running, it was like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. I don't have to feel like I have to double work. It felt like working, but it also felt very natural. And so I think it's like, I have so much passion for the things that I do. And it's because of the way that I was raised. And it's like, don't take anything for granted, but then also, how does that shape the weakness of like being people pleaser? And I know this about myself. It's like, quite literally the biggest fear in my life growing up was being alone. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's like, how do I make people happy? How do I make people not be turned away from me or angry at me or stuff like that? And it's like, okay, just make them happy, and sometimes it's like, and honestly, that's why I hired Kelly because, I'm in my contract year. And when I think about my relationship with like the North Face and like all these other brands and, people asking me to be on their team and all this stuff, it's like, oh my God, like I want to please every one of you. And I don't know how to like separate the feelings from the business side of it. And so I remember when I reached out to Kelly, I was like, this is why I need you is because I can't say no, or I feel guilty, or like I cringe away from the disappointment of that. Mm-hmm. And so
it's maybe like a self-protective,
100%,
self-preservation,
100%
defense mechanism to, you know, there's probably a 9-year-old girl inside of you who's afraid she's going to end up alone and destitute in an orphanage.
100%. 100%. Wow. Yes. And I know that's an insecurity that I carry with me, and I'm aware of it, but it's so strong and it's so engraved that I think I've just accepted the fact that sometimes I'm just going to have to ask for help, you know. And I think growing up with my siblings for those first like 9 years, it's like I learned to be so independent. And I like the whole people pleasing. It's like, I don't want to ask for people because who knows, I might be bothering them, you know? And so I remember heading into like this season, I was just like, it's okay to ask for help. Like, you don't have to do everything by yourself. And like, people love helping people, you know. It's like one of the greatest ways to feel good about yourself is I'm helping this person. And so I think that's one of the things that I've had to accept, you know. And I think the more you look at these really successful athletes out there, the more you realize like they're drawing from like so many sources, because they realize to do everything by yourself is to set yourself up for exhaustion and possibly failure. And so I'm slowly learning to be like, okay, like you can be people pleasing, but at the same time, you can also like watch out for yourself and like what you need in order to be successful. So, yeah.
Good for you, Jenn. You are wise beyond your years. You know, that's a lesson I'm still learning. I had to grow up pretty
fast.
Yeah, you certainly did.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much of that personal story. I am sort of at a loss as to where we should go now, but you know, I think I do want to just like kind of pivot and talk specifically now about a lot of the success that you've had. And I think we should spend the bulk of our time focusing on this season, because it's felt like a bit of a breakthrough before we start talking about Worlds. But I'd also maybe like to start this conversation about like performance and your career at the 2023 World Championships, where you finished 4th in the short trail, top American, a huge result, though painfully short of a medal. Tell me about that day and maybe the mix of emotions based on the result.
Yeah, I'm still kind of, to be honest, 2 years later, unsure how I did that, you know. And I think part of it was, you know, like I said in that post Broken Arrow panel to Danny, I think it was the lack of expectation and the idea of I did what I could to get here, and all I have to do is try. You know, because coming into Worlds in 2023, I had dealt with a stress reaction in my femoral neck, which is pretty not great as far as like high risk areas.
Serious as it gets, yeah.
Yes. And so, you know, heading into Worlds, you know, I'd done the Lake Sonoma Marathon and ran pretty slow based on my time from the previous year. And I was like, okay, well, like the fitness is slowly coming back. And, but at the same time, you know, I was like, but I also really worked hard, you know, with cross training and like doing the little things to lead me to Worlds. And I truly believed that I'm one of those people that I will suffer until I pass out. Like that's the way that I am. And so I remember being at the sideline of Worlds and thinking to myself, you're tough. You have grit. Just rely on the past work that you've done, even if it wasn't great. But you know you worked hard. Like I think about all the hours of cross training I did. I'm like, that has to count for something, you know? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've been telling myself before every start line this year is don't sandbag yourself. Like believe in your training, believe in like the work that you put in, because why would you show up to a start line and say, I don't belong here? Like that's just setting yourself up for failure, already like the mental side of running is truly a thing. And so when you tell yourself, you know what, I worked hard, I got here, and all I have to do is try, that it already is better than saying, well, we'll see what we can do, and it is like your body, it's like the mind over matter. And I just remember like starting Worlds and like, I was like, oh, I'm leading, like the first like 2 miles. And I was like, oh God. And then Judith comes and then Clementine comes. And I was pretty much in third for a little bit. And then I hit a wall and went from third all the way to 7th place. And this is at about mile 12. Granted, in 2022 and 23, new to this trail scene, I did not know how to fuel. I hadn't asked for help in regards to fueling. And so I remember being like, oh, I feel so bad. This race is already so bad. Like and I'm like, oh, Jen, you should probably eat something, like it's been a couple hours. And I get so caught up in training, in racing that I just like, that's so out of my, like what I'm supposed to be doing is also taking care of myself. And so I remember I downed like 3 or 4 gels. And then within like 20, 30 minutes, I was like, oh, I feel great again. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I remember looking down at my watch and it being like mile like 15, something like that, 15, 16. And I'm like, you have so much racing to do still. And so I remember it felt like I just got the second wind. And I remember just like starting to run everything again and started passing men and started passing women. And then before I knew it, I was like, oh, I'm in 4th place. And then heading to like the last big downhill, I remember I seen Anita and she's like, you got to go. Because at that point, I think I was like 2 minutes away from 3rd place, Teresa LaBeouf, and she'd passed me at like mile 11. And I'm pretty sure she'd gained like at least 10 minutes on me because I was like dying. Like when I had that bad phase of that race, I died. And so I just remember finishing and being like, I felt so strong. Like it was like, as soon as I took care of myself, it was like, if I would have done this right from the get-go, like maybe things would have been different, because I just remember like I ran like pretty much every uphill and downhill from eating those gels. And I say one of my strengths is like, I can grind for a long time on an uphill. And in a way I was like, okay, 4th is still really good. Like I was in it and that's kind of what I wanted. But I do think I remember talking to my coach and being like, hey, but I wanted to podium like that. I didn't realize that I wanted it until I was so close to it. Yeah. But at the same time, I was like, that was way more than I thought I could do that day. And it was only because I just tried. I believed in the training that I had done and I tried, and I wasn't sure if that training was going to be enough to podium, but I knew it was enough to like do something out there. And so, coming back to like 2025 now, people are like, you should do the short trail. You should do the short trail. And part of me is like, maybe I should have done the short trail. Like the more I think about it, the more, like after Broken Arrow, I had already committed to long trail after Speedgoat. I'm like, man, like with OCC and the short trail, like that could have been like my year, cause I feel so strong in these races. And most of the time it's like, I felt like at Broken Arrow, I felt so in control of that race. At Speedgoat, I felt so in control of that race. And part of me is like, I wonder what it would have been like if someone was like right next, or like passing me more, like Helen passed me at one point at Broken Arrow, but I was able to react to it. And so part of me is like, like I know the Europeans, like they're so nuts in the fact that like they make you work for every spot. Yeah. And I know, and that's one of the reasons I've been trying to race more internationally. Is like, I know I'm going to get the best out of myself by racing the best in the world. And so, but at the end of the day, I just felt like the long trail was like calling to me. Yeah. And because in 2022, I was supposed to do the long trail and I was really, really excited for the 80K in Thailand. And and then getting injured and not having been able to do that. And because, I've done 80Ks, but they've been, on the more runnable side, JFK and then Templiers was pretty runnable until the last section. And so part of me is like, I would love to do one that is suited more to my strength, which is really mountainous. And so this profile just seemed to fit that. And I was just like, if this is the year to do an 80K that suits my strengths, and I'm feeling really fit, like I should go for it and just trust that maybe this is the way my career is supposed to go.
It is like a good bet on yourself. And we'll come back and talk about worlds here, but first, let's talk about the season. I think maybe let's skip over Trans Gran Canaria Marathon, which you won for the second year in a row. An awesome result, and spend a minute on canyons too, because you DNF'd and it preceded these two big back-to-back course record victories. What happened at canyons and how did you bounce back?
Yeah. So, at canyons, we don't know exactly what happened as far as like, stomach stuff. All I know is that right before that, the morning of the race, I just felt a little off in the sense of, eating breakfast and all that. And I had a hard time just like eating a piece of toast. And normally I'm one of those people that I wake up, I have my bagel, my coffee, my banana. Like it's pretty simple. It's pretty regimented. I do it before every race, before every workout, before every long run. And I just remember like sitting in the counter, just being like this, like, I can't eat this thing. Like it just sounds so nauseating. And I was like, okay, maybe it's just nerves, like maybe it's just nerves. And I remember getting to the start line and the gong goes off, and I was just like, okay, Jen, just like stick with the top women for now. And, Tabor goes out really hard and I follow, and Hannah, and I think, there was another girl who followed Jack's, what's her name? The Jackson girl. What's her name? Heather Jackson.
Heather Jackson.
There you go. I was like the Jackson girl.
The Jackson girl.
Anyway, so there's this basically four of us who are pretty much together. Tabor's a little bit more and I, further ahead when this huge like uphill starts. And having run that race last year, I'm like, man, I just feel so off. Like, and I'm just like, okay, just keep racing. Like, maybe you're just having like a weird off moment. Maybe once you keep running, you'll get better. And it did not get better. I, at one point, started to cramp. And I was like, man, we're mile like 10. Like, how am I cramping already? Like, and then I remember eating my gels, drinking, and immediately being like, I need to throw up. And then Tabor made a move because we were all running together, like in a single file. Tabor, went around me. Hannah went around me. They laughed and I just couldn't respond. It felt like I was one of those running nightmares where you're running really hard, but you're going nowhere.
I've had a few of those.
Yeah, where you're just like, even if it's like a scary scene where you're just like, oh, this monster's coming to get me, but like I'm running so fast and I'm not going anywhere. He's getting closer and closer. Like that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
And then I remember in a series of maybe 5 to 10 minutes, just stopping and just like projectile vomiting my gels and my
So there was
liquid.
just something going on, just like a mysterious illness.
Yeah. And then basically so I decided to drop out. I was still in third place, which felt really, really hard to make that call. But I was just like, to think about doing this for another hour felt just, it didn't make sense to me, especially when I had all these races coming up. And so I made the call to drop out. And that was really, really sad. That was like my second, CC in 2023 was my first DNF. This was my second DNF. And I remember that was like the hardest part about it all was the DNFing part, because you days pass and you're like, I should have kept going. Maybe things sort of turned around. You just question yourself for making that decision. But honestly, canyons wrecked me for like 10 days after, more than Broken Arrow and Speedgoat.
Yeah. There's probably just something weird going on.
And it was just bad.
Well, one little blip on the radar before kaboom, Jenn Lichter, bang, bang. I was looking at your Strava, and I saw that before Broken Arrow, you did the biggest training week of your life and career. Maybe it was 2 weeks before.
Yes.
And it makes me want to just kind of ask about training, especially now as we begin to explore Broken Arrow and Speedgoat. Like, what were the things that kind of led to these back-to-back big breakthroughs? And especially like Speedgoat, that was felt like a historic 50K run. So maybe you could share any and all details of your training from specifically this summer that may have contributed to those two big results.
That's a great question. I've gotten a lot of questions in regard of like what changed in terms of running these times, and even with TGC, it's like I ran 18 minutes faster than I did last year.
Damn.
I ran 13 minutes faster at Broken Arrow than I did in 2022.
You're an hour faster at Speedgoat.
And so, people ask me like what changed, what happened. And, as far as training, that training is pretty similar, honestly, like in regards to just like every day, every week thing. I think, one thing that I changed was my nutrition. So I was, and not to bash on people who are, but I was vegan for a few years and into 22. And then this past fall, like November 2024, I decided to just go back to just eating like whatever I wanted.
Omnivorously.
Yes. Whole foods, whatever. And I remember taking my first bite of hamburger and just my eyes rolled in the back of my head. Like that was the greatest thing I've ever tasted in my life. And, all this previous years, I've always felt like something was missing. And I think nutrition has part of that, why I'm running way better. But at the same time, I also started working with a strength coach, talking about, asking for help in different regards of not always doing things by yourself. I started working with a strength coach last September. And I just feel like because of those small little changes that I've made training, I think I'm getting more from my training than I was before. And so I think the training is the bonus, and the fitness that comes from like doing all these things that work for me and feel right for me have led to like such a breakthrough. And I do feel like every year I just get stronger and stronger. And every year I am able to like challenge myself more. And I do think that in particular this year, I've been focusing more on the vert. In previous years, I would just kind of be like, oh, I'll just do whatever I feel like. I think the biggest weeks I would do would be like 10 to 12,000 feet of vert a week, which is like, it's good, but it's not great when it comes to like super mountainous stuff. And, this year I've been able to get into like the 18s and 19s. And I think it just makes me more resilient in the up and down and like the changing of everything. But it's funny. It's like, there's no really secret sauce. It was just like training was the same, but I changed different things that maybe weren't working for me, like nutrition, like strength training. And I think overall that all the little parts came together, and now I think I'm creating something that is a key to like my success.
Yeah. It's more about consistency over time rather than changing anything profoundly. And you certainly are emerging into your prime years now. And I recall back at Broken Arrow, you, Helomino Faulkner, Danny Moreno were only separated by a little over a minute at the finish line. And one of the themes that we've talked about on the show now all summer is kind of this idea of learning how to win. And of course, on that day, it could have gone in anybody's direction. Of course, we talked about how Helen caught you and you had the wherewithal to respond back and win the race. Is there anything there that would be interesting to talk about just like what put you over the top, both at Broken Arrow and Speedgoat? Is it strategy, psychology, a little bit of luck, a combination of the three? How are you learning how to win at this phase of your career?
I think it's trusting your instinct and trusting that when you race, this feels right. So to some people, they see me race and they're like, Jenn went out way too hard, you know, like I'm going to let her go. She's going to fade or she's going to die or whatever. To me, from my perspective, it's like trusting that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. At Broken Arrow, I went out and I felt comfortable. Like it felt comfortable to me. So it's like trusting your race and trusting your fitness and trusting that like feedback from the race, you know, like, oh, climbing's feeling good. Okay, let's just keep climbing this way, you know? And I think it's also just like learning to stay calm through it all. Because I think sometimes like in big races, you know, like Broken Arrow and Speedgoat, you see these women who are lining up and immediately it's like your heart rate goes up and you're just thinking like, oh, I got to drop them right away. You know, like, oh, I got to make a move at some point to like, you know, assert my dominance or whatever. And it's like, no, it doesn't have to be that way. It could be like, this is the race that I'm running. And if you guys can keep up, great. If you can't, then too bad, you know, too bad.
Maybe we'll see you later, but maybe we won't.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, it's like, don't freak. Like if I go and I start a race, like at Speedgoat, for example, you know, I started a race and I'm like, okay, this feels right. This doesn't feel like I'm like, you know, on gear 5, you know, this feels like I'm in gear like 2 and 3. This feels like a good start to this race. And then I remember at one point looking down as I'm climbing like a baldy and I see Grayson Murphy and I'm like, oh, she has to be like 2 minutes behind me. And my initial thought is like, I need to like push it right now, you know? But then I'm like, but why? Like right now, this is a hard effort that is sustainable so that you can make moves later. And so it is like, how do you like not freak out when moments, you know, when Helen passed me, it's like, how do you not freak out during that moment? Instead, just like focus on like how you're feeling, positive reinforcement. Like, you know, when Helen passed me, I remember I kept thinking to myself, like, just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Like, that's all you can do. And so I did. And then I was like, okay, can you run now? And so then I started running and I realized like, oh, she can't run the uphills anymore. Like she tries to run them and she slowly reverts to hiking. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm hiking because I'm like dealing with cramps right now, but I can still run. And so it's like, okay, so like, no, don't freak out, like power hike through here, stake on her tail until like your cramping's gone. Once you feel like it's safe enough to run and you're not going to pull on something, do it. And so that's kind of what happened is I was just like, okay, do what you can right now, stick to her, keep her in your like periphery. And then when you can make a move, do it. Mm-hmm. And so I remember the same thing with Grayson is, you know, I go over Baldy, she's close, heading to like Hidden Peak 2. And I remember I'm like, okay, now I can make a move, you know? And it's like, because I remember thinking like the hardest part of the training where like pacing is crucial is over. Now we can actually like go deep in the well and like not look back.
Yeah.
And I just remember I took off and I think at the top of Hidden Peaks, I think I was 2.5 minutes in front of Emma and Grayson because they were about a minute from each other. And then by the time I finished, I was like 6-7 minutes. Yeah. And so I think it's just like learning to trust, like, okay, I've done these races before. I know how to pace them and I know how to trust that this is the effort that is, you know, it's important for right now. Yeah. And like not getting carried away with like thinking too far ahead. So like basically racing in the now versus racing in like the future and racing in like the past of like, oh, did I go out too fast? Or like, am I going to die in the future? You know?
Yeah. What I'm hearing is boldness meets composure. And it makes me want to ask you a bit more about like your racing style, because you're sort of talking about it now, but you said earlier something to the effect of, you know, I'm tough. I know I'm tough. And as somebody who doesn't know you well, but who's seen you race at least a couple of times, like you can feel the intensity of Jenn Lichter on the race course. And you do have sort of like a front running style. You do kind of have like a, I don't know, Prefontaine racing strategy, or like a Zach Miller, where like nobody's going to out tough Zach Miller. Nobody's going to out tough Jenn Lichter. But it does require like boldness, and it requires composure. Have you always felt comfortable as a front runner? I mean, you also mentioned that at the World Championships in 2023 that you took the lead, at probably 27-year-old, fairly inexperienced racing on the, you know.
That was my first international race.
Wow.
I didn't know who was passing. Like I later learned it was Judith who passed me, and I was like, oh, she's great. You know, like,
she's pretty good.
She's pretty good.
But is that sort of like, I don't know, maybe a reflection of your personality, and sort of maybe a reflection of where we started our conversation here, but also is it a reflection of kind of what you need to do to win now? I mean, because people could view you as certainly the best like mountain 50K runner in the US, if not the world right now.
Yeah. So it's funny because all through high school and all through college, I was not a front runner. I actually was the opposite, where I would start more reserved, and then like I call it Pac-Manning people. I just like eat people as the race continued. And I think that was for me just the lack of self-belief, and the belief that I didn't belong in the front. And I think that was my way of being like, now I don't have any pressure to win, so I'm just gonna start back here and then do what I can to like move forward.
Wow.
Fast forward to trail running, and now I think my style of racing comes from like having done the opposite in the past, knowing why I did it. And then like, for me, it's more like, no, this is how I tell myself that I belong here. And this is how I tell myself that I'm going to make this race as hard as possible for me. And if that makes it as hard as possible for other people, great. Then we're going to push each other, you know? And one of the things that I like to say is, and I think I said it at Speedgoat at one of my friend who like interviewed me. And I said, I don't like the championship style races of like everyone just, you know, like you see it in track and field, where like everyone like is afraid to make a move. And then it just comes down to like, who's the better sprinter. That drives me bonkers, because I feel like in trail running, like in order to be the best, you have to put your cards all out there on the table.
Yeah.
You know, and for me, it's like, why would I leave this trail race to the best downhiller? Why would I leave, you know? So for me, it's like, if you want to win this thing, I'm going to make it hard for you. And, you know, if that means someone's going to make it hard for me to win, great. But that means that we have to use all our cards, you know, like our weaknesses, our strengths, you know, like all of that. And so I feel like that's the way that I like to race. It's like, no, we're here to race each other. We're here to test our fitness. And so I'm not going to just like sit back and chill. Like I'm going to make it hard from the get-go, because this is what we're here for. And then I think it's also more gratifying. It's like, oh, I left everything out there. I used, and
it's much more entertaining for the media and the fans too. So let's be honest, my experience is better too. And I mean, that's what makes Prefontaine still a legend here 50 years after his death, was because he never sat in the pack and waited for, you know, a kick to decide a race. He always put pressure on people, and he made it.
It's like, you have to be good at everything, you know, you have to, you know, use your weaknesses and use your strengths if you want to win this race. And, you know, I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes it's like, maybe it won't work, you know, maybe one of these days I go out way too hard and I die. But at the same time, it's like, but I put all my cards out there, and I at least did my best to like use everything and all that hard work that I've put in the months. Because at the end of the day, like racing is the celebration of all the hard work that you've done. You know, it is not like well, I don't want to feel pain because pain sucks. It's like, no, this is what you've been practicing for, you know? And so like, don't hold back, because then what are those, you know, all those hard months of work are for nothing then if you are not using it to like bring the best out of yourself.
Oh, Jenn, I'm ready to run through a brick wall right now. So let's finish by talking about Worlds. Look ahead a little bit. Of course, you got a well-deserved long trail spot via resume. You also qualified for short trail. You decided to go long trail. We talked about that at the top of the episode. But of course, you would have gone into short trail as one of the contenders, one of the favorites for a gold medal. It's a little, in your own mind, probably less certain. I'd love to hear how you think about it from a confidence perspective, you not being super experienced in races of this distance, and the ones that you've done are faster and quote unquote easier than the course that you're going to confront in Confranc. Why was 2025 the right year to bet on yourself in this way? And where's your confidence at with the long trail specifically?
You know, it's so funny that you asked me this question about like doing something that, you know, maybe you haven't had much experience in, and, you know, but at the same time, I do think belief is like huge in that. And, you know, like we just saw Katie Scheid get third as years and all, and going into that race, I remember her post saying something like getting ready, you know, I'm going to get my butt kicked or butt handed to me. And, you know, to her, that race is way out of her league, quote unquote, her league. And then she got third. And so I just think like going into this long trail race, it's like, well, I understand it, Katie, because I also feel that way of like, yeah, maybe this is out of my comfort zone, but at the same time, like, I know I'm fit. And like, I know that like, I'm going to try hard and hope for the best. And so for me this year, it felt right because I've been itching to challenge myself in the racing scene as far as distance. So, you know, the past 2 years, I've been ending my seasons with more 80Ks because I do want to eventually make that jump into 100Ks. You know, and I've done 50Ks now since 2022. And I think I'm just like in that phase of my career where I'm just really curious about how these other distances are going to be. And am I going to be able to make that transition smoothly? I'm such a competitive person that when I think about the long trail team right now, I immediately am like, I want to win it, you know, like, and it's not like an egotistic thing. It's like, it's more of like, I believe in my training. I believe in like my mindset right now. And I believe that if I do it right, I could do it correctly. I can be successful at it because I feel like I've gotten little snippets from like Templiers was huge last year in the sense of learning so much from it. Mm-hmm. I just remember like going out and I remember I was like, okay, I'm going to stick with Blondine for like this start of this race because she's very experienced in the long stuff. And I got greedy. Like at mile 20, I was like, she's going too slow. And I made a move and I passed her. And I just remember being like, I can't let this leader get away, you know, because he was like one Kip run gal, I don't remember her name, Blondine and we were all like running together. And for that one girl made a move and Blondine stayed back. And I was like, okay. And then like a few miles go by and I'm just like, gosh, I think she's going too slow. And so I just passed her and I just went after that first runner because that's the way I race, you know? And I was like, no, I got to keep an eye on the leader. Mile 36 comes around. So 16 miles later, I'm like, oh God, went
I already
out.
know what's going to happen.
I'm like, oh my goodness. I feel like my race is supposed to be done right now. Like,
yeah.
And then Blondine comes by and she
Just
passes me,
past.
And I was like, okay. And then Sylvia comes past me, and then Caitlin Fielder comes past me, and then Clementine comes past me, and I'm just like crawling my way to the finish at this point. And, I still got 5th, which I was like, okay, it's better than, getting 18th or whatever.
Sure.
But I just felt like I just completely fell apart after mile 36.
You're just like, what would have happened if I just would have hung with Blandine?
Exactly. Yeah. And, coming out of that race, I was like, okay, we still ran a very, very fast time. Like in years past, like my 7:59 would have been either won or gotten like second place, so we still ran really fast. And I just remember coming out of Templiers and thinking to myself, you gotta be smart about the pacing, and you gotta learn from these women. And so for me, it's, going into Worlds, I'm like, okay, all I can do is race with the top women, know who is racing, know who's experienced, and just like try to put my guns in the show. And like, and so I feel like Templiers gave me this insight of like, you can't be too greedy with these long races, because you can get away with it with a 50K. But when it comes to like the 8+ hour mark, pacing is so important.
Yeah.
And so, I think coming out of Templiers this year, I was like, I learned so much, and I felt so good for those like 36 miles. And like looking back on my Strava and that race, my 50K was like just as fast as like the Canyons 50K from that when I got second. It was so fast. I ran that 50K.
It's too fast. Yeah.
Way too fast for an 80K with 12,000 feet and all that climbing at the very end.
Yep.
And so I just get really excited thinking about long trail. And so that makes me realize that this is the right move, because I think if you're excited about racing something, your training follows that excitement.
Totally.
And your mindset follows that excitement. And so, that's kind of the way that I'm viewing long trail, is curiosity, excitement, but also very competitive.
You want to win. You said it yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. So a couple more quick things before we get to our traditional closing question, but Team USA is stacked. In addition to yourself, Katie Scheid, who we all know is, at the top of her game right now. Mm-hmm. Allison Baca, Emily Smits, Claire Rhodes, Shea Aquilano. How do you balance like individual goals versus team goals? I'm sure the audience would be curious, because it is a different format than traditional trail racing, things like UTMB or Broken Arrow, Western States or whatever. There are multiple accomplishments that you can aim for. Have you begun to think about that at all? Or are you just kind of focused on your own day?
Well, it's funny because like when you run in college and you're running in high school, it's pretty much the same thing, where it's like, It's individual, but it's also team based. And so going into Worlds, I'm pretty much treating it like that. Like by taking care of me and by trying the best that I can on race day, I hope to pull those women along with me as well. And I think at the same time, like, you can be encouraging, but you can also be individualistic and like, but I want to win this. Because I do think that if you think about your performance first, I think the team follows.
Yeah.
Because if you think about your teammates, then you're not focusing on the race.
Yeah.
And you're not focusing on moves, and you're not focusing about like, oh, I should probably be moving up in the field, or I should, and I think just by racing your own race, because all these women have the potential to do really, really well in this race. And if we all do our own thing, have a great day, the result follows. And I think in general, like, besides track and field, like cross country is pretty similar. It's like most of the time you just run your own race. And as a team, because you guys run your own race and you're focused on yourself, you end up doing way better.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that if I'm running and I'm dying and someone comes up and, they pat me on the back and say, stick with me. Like, obviously that's really important. It's like, how do you lift people up who maybe are not having a great day? So also being aware of that. But at the same time, I think you'll do more by running your own race and focusing on yourself and taking yourself than not. I think you'll do more service to it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to see you compete over there, especially in the long trail. I think it is
poles.
Yes. Which is a perfect segue to my second to last question for you here. You've already teased this, but it seems like you are curious to explore the longer distances as you mature in your career. Have you started to give any longer term thought into things that might motivate you this season and in years to come? Will we see you maybe chasing CCC, maybe golden tickets, Western States? How are you thinking about your career and sort of the medium term?
Well, so I've been telling people that, Worlds is going to really give me an insight into whether I'm going to start doing 100Ks next year. Cause I really want to do Black Canyon. That course seems like something I would enjoy. And then obviously go back to UTMB and do that, whether it's OCC, or CCC, cause I love running really fast, but like I said earlier, I also love a good grind. Yeah. And I just feel like Worlds will be a really great indicator, because I do think women are going to be in the 10 to 11 hour with this course. Yeah. Which is, that's pretty much in the 100K category as far as time. Mm-hmm. And and I'm hoping that he goes well, because I'm at a point in my 50K career where I'm like, okay, I'm pretty satisfied. Even if, 2 or 3 years people come and kick my times in the butt, that's great. But I feel like right now I'm so satisfied with it. And the only thing for me is OCC. It's I want to go back and not drop out and really give the course what I think I can give it. And maybe that's next year. But I mean, yeah, I'm really excited for the longer stuff. Putting my head down, and I call it going lizard brain, where you just you don't think, you just do. And, and you rely back on what you've been practicing in training, as far as oh, this is hard, but I know I survived it in training. And so it is just going glass-eyed and just moving one foot in front of the other. And, I'm pretty good at doing that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I'm so interested. And I think that is the curiosity of choosing the long trail over the short trail, is this will be a great stepping stone into what is Jenn doing next year. Yeah. And the following year. Yeah.
Yeah. I think just for the audience here, 3 things that I'm personally very much looking forward to here: Eli Hemming going for CCC, David Sinclair going for CCC, and Jenn Lichter going for Long Trail World Championships. I think there's kind of a similarity between the 3 of you all being great 50K runners, all being great in the mountains, and all now experimenting with the longer distances in the next, call it 6 or 7 weeks between now and the world champs. Yeah. Okay.
I think it's a better step than Golden Trail and 100K. Yeah. 50K, 100K.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Step by step.
Step by step.
Jenn, you're so awesome. This has been such a joy to chat with you now for the last, hour and 15 minutes. I end all these conversations with the same closing question. That is just, who is one person that you admire inside or outside of sport, living or dead? Why do you admire that person?
Oh, man. I admire my Aunt Gretchen. She died of brain cancer a couple years ago. But she just led her life with such an excitement and curiosity. And I think she is kind of one of my role models as far as getting outside and doing hard things. And one of the quotes that I always use, and I'm sure brands love this quote, is there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. Because she literally, if she had an itching to do anything outside, she would do it, regardless whether it was snowing, raining, thundering, whatever. It's like she led her life through curiosity and joy and excitement, and that's kind of how I like to lead my life. Be childlike, not childish, and so that's she's always been my role model. And there's the picture behind her of her, and a lot of ways my dad always said I remind her of her, so I remind him of her. So yeah, she's great.
Shout out Aunt Gretchen.
Yes.
One
great.
final thing actually that's just popping into my head, if you don't mind. I know you're an artist too. Share a little bit about art and how it counterbalances your athletic career.
Yeah, I it's another part of me that, when running is in the back burner, like I'm injured or maybe I'm burnt out or maybe don't have it as a way to express myself in my life. Art is that other outlet for me. And art has kind of always been that from the very beginning, probably honestly before running it was a way that I expressed. It was the way that I coped and I expressed maybe like some inner conflicts or sadness, joy, life. A lot of what I paint is a lot of what sticks to me in my mind, the places and the people. And, you'll never see me painting something that I'm not joy and curious about, joy driven and curious about. And so, I feel like in my latest projects, it was all Glacier National Park inspired, because that was the defining moment of like why I moved to Montana. I went to Glacier for 3 days and packed my car and moved here, just out of a whim. And so a lot of my art from, the past couple of years is because of Glacier. And it's all Glacier, and it's like little moments in Glacier that, for me meant a lot. And maybe I cried in that river, or maybe I had a light bulb go up in another. And so, so I feel like it's my other form of expression aside from being a runner. And I think it's good to have this other side of you that maybe it's not connected to performance and an audience. And Well,
Jenn, congratulations on all your recent success. We will miss you in Chamonix, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing you in Confranc, and I'm really grateful you come on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.